Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the First Nations and Native American peoples. Here where I am in Vancouver, these peoples are the Musqueam, Stolo, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. But I know where many of you are, you're on the land of other nations. Always, but especially during this time, let us remember our connection to our sisters and brothers in these nations and pray for the day in which we might be in right relationship. Welcome. Welcome to Living Interfaith. Know that the whole of you is welcome. You're not asked to leave who you are at the door. Please bring who you are into this community today. But what you are asked to remember is that the faces around you have brought who they are into this community as well. And all of goodwill are welcome. Bruce and Cheryl, our musicians, are not with us this morning. So Carolyn and Greg are so lovely and they've agreed to lead our opening song. So I'll be muting myself, and if they would like to start us, you're free to sing at home.
Yeah, I just want to check, did you have some words up there for us? Because we're not really sure of the song.
We're not even sure we got the right one.
We thought that there might be words or music that you'd be putting up, in which case we could play it and sing it.
Oh, that makes sense. I do have it somewhere, but I don't know how to look for it.
Not on the screen. Okay, now.
Could you sing the first 2 bars or so, just so we know we got the right one?
Yes, absolutely. It's come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving.
Okay, now Eloisha, you said you had the words, I think, because I don't have the words. So
I've done this enough times.
All right,
okay,
would you like to
well,
Eloisha?
Greg will play, maybe.
All I've got is the first 2 lines, so. Is that the proper chords?
It'll work.
Okay, there you are.
No, I'm gonna go lower.
Okay, lower for.
How about I just sing it?
Okay.
How about that'll work?
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leave. Ours is no care of and of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leading. Ours is no care of and of despair. Come, yet again come.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Eloisia. So first, I'll just start with some announcements. Later today at 4 o'clock, Salaam and Cedar, which is an outdoor Christian ministry, will be holding their first in-person service since March. I believe they're going to be meeting in North Vancouver behind St. Clement Church. But Bryn, can you confirm if that's correct?
That is correct, at 4 p.m.
Okay, and everybody is welcome, and it's outdoors, so it's necessarily somewhat socially distanced. Is that right?
Yes, and people are asked to, if you're carpooling, just carpool with people that are in your immediate circle. So we're trying to keep people safe. So
that's great. Thank you. Also, tomorrow night from 7:30 to 8:30, Temple Or Shalom is going to hold their monthly chanting and chocolate gathering over Zoom. So it's actually very sweet. Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan and her husband Charles, they have a band that plays both at Or Shalom and other places. And once a month they like to get together and play Hebrew music, and people do the chants. And then usually they would share brownies and fudge in the basement. So unfortunately they can't share that part now, but people are encouraged to have their own desserts at home and then enjoy those while listening to the music. So you're welcome to join that. The link is on their website, or I'd be happy to send it to you. Also, So we were discussing last time that I wanted to set up something so that we had services, or not services, but some kind of gathering every week. So happily, Sukhvinder Kaur Vinning, who was with us last time, she's agreed to run regular monthly meditation gatherings for us. So she'll be leading that this coming Tuesday from 7 to 8. Everyone's welcome. You don't have to have any kind of meditation practice already in place if you want to come. She's really skilled, and it's so beautiful, as you've seen with some of the services she's already joined us for. And I can put the Zoom link in the chat, and then I'll make sure that we put it on the website. So people will be able to do those. So if you want to join, that's going to be Tuesday from 7 to 8, our first monthly meditation. And then finally, Steve Slocum, who's here, even though we can't see him, and Siddiqa Jessa, they're both board members of ours. And the three of us taught an anti-racism training last night, mostly to Siddiqa's Shia Muslim community, but also some of the folks that Steve knows through his work with Christians and Muslims. And Carolyn was there too, which was great. And it went very well, I think. And it was about 3 hours. We're going to be doing another one for the Muslim Food Bank next month. And folks are welcome to join. And this is both some of the work we'd like to do for anti-racism to help incorporate and make things safer for Black friends, but also to help bring people together in different ways. So that's a way to get to know some more friends from the Muslim community and the Christian community if you'd like to join. So I'll be posting that information, giving it to LVC to post on the website too. So that's it for my announcements. Does anyone else have any announcements they'd like to share now? Okay, thank you very much. So let's just come into silence and we'll do our opening prayer. Creator God, Great Spirit, we pray our thanks for the opportunity to gather in this sacred space. Here we are most aware of the gift of wind and the 4 directions from which it comes. Here we are most aware of the gift of sun and the 4 directions from which it comes. Here we are most aware of the gift of humanity and the 4 directions in which we exist. Here we are most aware of the gift of creation and the 4 directions which support our living, breathing, and being. This day we pray thanksgiving for the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people of Canada and the United States, and we commit ourselves to be people of love and reconciliation. May the sun bring you new energy by day. May the moon softly restore you by night. May the rain wash away your worries. May the breeze blow new strength into your being. May you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life. Now if we'll offer each other a sign of peace. I can try to unmute everyone, and then we can just go around as we'd like and say something like peace be with you as well. Salam alaikum wa alaikum assalam. Peace, everyone.
Peace be unto you.
Peace be with you.
Peace
Peace
be with
to
you.
everyone.
Peace be with you, everyone.
Peace be with you, everyone.
Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Peace be with you all.
Peace to everyone.
Peace from the Kootenays in BC.
Now to be peaceful night. Assalamu alaikum.
Peace be with you. Salam.
Thank you. Now I'll share my screen, and if you'll join me in our joint affirmation, it's listed right here. We come together in peace. We sing together in joy and with love. We worship together in one house, a house with names beyond number. Our paths are many, Our beliefs are as leaves, and the tree that we cleave to is nourished by the light of compassion, justice, and mutual respect. May our lives, our beliefs, and our actions help to bring about the world of love we all seek. And let it begin here. And now we're going to take just about 2 minutes. We'll come into silence, all of us. And this is where we all pray in our own way. We come from a wide variety of traditions and have different ways of praying. But this is where we pray for something happening in the world, people who are being affected by something right now. Unfortunately, there's so much going on that it's kind of difficult to pick just one thing. I think because I was watching the coronavirus numbers rise over the last couple of days, and it looks like it's very difficult for the hospital system right now in so many places to sustain and take care of all the patients who have the coronavirus. I'd like to pray for the doctors and nurses myself today, but you're all welcome to pray for whatever most moves you. We'll just do that for a few minutes in silence. Thank you. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to stop the recording so that people will feel free to share. And then I am very honored now to welcome Dorothy. So Dorothy's been an elder at Hummingbird Ministries since 2008. She is Niya or Cree from Treaty 6 territory at Saddle Lake First Nation in Alberta. She's an elder for the Métis Family Services and a teacher of the Nihiyaw language at the Native Education College in Vancouver and the Frafraka organization in Surrey. That's FRAFCA. She's also a survivor of the Indian residential school system. Prior to retirement, Dorothy worked for many years in the nursing field. She's a traditional powwow dancer, and her children were also dancers. She's a musician and singer who has composed several songs in both Nihiyawewen and English. And when asked directly, she said she's also a very busy great-grandma, and she loves working with people, children, and families. So thank you so much for joining us now, Dorothy.
Thank you for inviting me. Did you want me to say the Our Father? No? Did you want me to share? I'd just like to share a little bit about the prayer that we said this morning. And my prayer is Psalm 67 of asking the Lord that all nations come together to worship him. Let all the nations praise you, O God. Okay. So that was my prayer this morning, and Mary's ministry is multicultural and also ecumenical ministry. And I was brought up with the Roman Catholic Church. My grandparents were very indigenous in their practices. My grandma always had a sweat lodge. she was a woman of a healer with many medicines to heal people's sick illnesses, and also a midwife. And they took us to church every Sunday as well, and prayed with us on a daily basis. So I had a really good start as a child. Even so, the residential school was extremely sad, you know, being taken away from home and family, loving home and family. And a lot of the parents whose children were being taken away started to drink, and that began the alcoholism, the addictions on the reservations. And in the meantime, the children who were being brought to the schools were sent home when they were in grade 8, or if they were 16 years old, were sent back to the reservation. And the way of life was depleting on the reservations as the people were placed on reservations, and their way of life was depleting. So that brought on the poverty on the reservations, because there was no work. So anyway, I just wanted to share that, you know, a lot that happened to the First Nations people was not their fault, you know, and there's still a lot of poverty on the reservations because of, you know, they didn't have the education. There are a lot of educated First Nations now. The residential school that I went to became a healing center. Our reservation, the South Lake Reservation, took it over. They made it into a healing center, and then it became a high school, then a college, and it's now a university. And there are university graduates' pictures all over the walls of that university. So I'm quite happy to share that. And the important thing, you know, that Mary is doing is that, you know, she works with children and families, and the children are learning to be proud of who they are as individuals, and hopefully they will all grow up, you know, get education and be survivors. And I just wanted to share that. Hi. And as we say in the Cree language, all my relations, because we're all related. And my late husband, who was Dutch, always said, the blood that runs through our veins is all the same color. So thank you. Did you want me to say the Our Father now? Or did you want more sharing? Kathy.
Hi, sorry, yes, if you'd like to say the Our Father, and thank you so much for your sharing.
Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. Mamanuhtawinan kiskisko kayain, ktanan biwichgate kuihuniak te kiskisko, epsiminuta kosketaskami. Anoskagiskak minane pahkaskamna minatahtogi sigagi. Vaiskasenama, excuse me. Anoskagiskak minan pahkaskamna minatahtogi sigagi. Kaiskasena moajaki kahkio kaki maituta guahki epsimine siga kasena maunan kaki maituta ma. Seskemna ne gaika machamam tenehtama. Katena maunan kahkio gamaya taktanane usihki. Hi, all my relations. Kahkio no kumaganak. Hi. Thank you. Kathy, can't hear you.
Kathy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was still muted. Thank you very much for that. And now I'm going to read some scripture readings for this week before I turn it over to Mary. So our first one is Genesis 22, 1 through 14. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father," and he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So the 2 of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide," as it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep the sleep of death. And my enemy will say, "I have prevailed." My foes will rejoice because I am shaken. But I trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. And finally, Matthew 10:40 through 42. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous man in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. And now, Mary, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. I thought it was unmuted, so anyway, I'm okay, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Those scriptures today are so hard. But first, I want to say thank you for this invitation. I'm very honored by your request, and also for acknowledging National Indigenous Peoples Day. It's I'd like to say happy National Indigenous Peoples Day. And at the same time, I'm thinking of the 8 people that have been killed by police in the past month, the 8 Indigenous people. And also I heard last night that the 14 premiers cannot agree that there's any anti-racism against Indigenous people in Canada. That's so disheartening. So yeah, happy Indigenous Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. Same old, but I think things are changing, I hope. So, as I was saying, our scriptures today are hard. I mean, in our Genesis story, Abraham is asked to offer his only son, Isaac, as a sacrifice to God. In Psalm 13, David has been suffering for a long time and praying for help, but God seems to have abandoned him. I can imagine that feeling. He asks, how long, O Lord, will you forget me? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? In the Gospel of Matthew reading, Jesus is sending his disciples out to spread the gospel, but he warns them to expect opposition and violence by those in power. And second, that they risk their lives to work for justice, that they are to expect to be counted among the little ones for whom a cup of cold water is a gift. To accomplish that kind of righteousness that is inherent in these stories is alien, is strange to most of us human beings, even though we try. So how many of us would kill our only child as a sacrifice out of love for God? Abraham passed the test of faith for God's provision. Sure enough, before he stabbed his son, God provided a ram for the sacrifice. David kept on waiting on God, trusting in his steadfast love, and God is there for him after all. But for the disciples in the Matthew reading, their reward is in heaven. They are granted remarkable powers, even to raise the dead, but at the same time, their closest and most important relationships will be broken. The only relationship that remains intact is their relationship with God. By following Jesus, they accept that they will suffer now, but their eschatological reward will be great. At Hummingbird Ministries circles, my sermons or reflections include Bible stories as well as teaching stories of the Nehiel people. Sometimes people ask me, how can you still believe in the white man's religion after residential schools and after what they're doing to harm your people? Yes, it's true that the pain and suffering endured for the past 300 years is great, especially the residential schools and the taking of our children. But also the judgment against our Indigenous ways of connecting with our Creator before the newcomers came to our land. Even our prayers were taken away. And so that is not a good witness to the love that we hear about in these scriptures. But the story of a man from heaven coming to save his mother Mary's people is not totally foreign to Prairie First Nations in North America, at least not to the Cree. We have stories which are similar to some of the Bible stories. The Lakota have a story of a white buffalo calf woman who came from heaven to help them by teaching a buffalo how to give up their lives so that the Kota would not starve. In a Cree story about the star people, a young earth woman fell in love with the star man who comes to earth. She goes to the heavens and becomes his wife, and they have a son. One day, as she's working in her garden, she pulls out this huge turnip, and through that hole, she looks down and she sees her family. And she longs to be with them, and she longs that her son would meet his relatives, his earthly relatives. So she pleads with Grandfather, the Grandfather of Heaven, who finally allows her to take her son to earth. There's more to the story, but the point that I'm making now is that we have stories that are similar to the Christmas story, similar to this story. And our elders say that these are our own stories and not influenced by Christianity. Like Jesus, the baby in our story was born of both heavenly and earthly ancestry. He was human because of his earthly mother and spirit because his father was a starman. I'm sure no matter which culture we come from, we have stories of sacrificial love where someone is willing to die for others. And Chief Mistawasis, which is my chief from Mistawasis, was one of the Treaty 6 chiefs who was willing to give up his life for his people. One day, as they were traveling, he was traveling with a group of women, children, and elders. They were going to their winter camp, and the men were out hunting. So one morning, the chief spotted some riders in a distance. Concerned that his people would be killed, he told them to move in a different direction while he led the riders in the opposite direction. In the prairies, there are a few bushes, and especially in some areas. But at one place, he stopped and rode his horse into the little clump of bushes. When the riders caught up with him, they got off their ponies and laughed because he had no place to go. He was going to get away. But as they were waiting, a white buffalo emerged from the bush. They were very afraid and rode away. Our chief was willing to give up his own life to save his people. Nkesemanto, our God, Great Spirit, transformed him. My elders taught me that we all come from the heavens. Some people call it the sky rock, which was there before Earth was formed. And that's how far some of the memories take us in the stories. They say that the main reason that we're sent to Earth is to learn how to love. That there was a time when all living things on heaven and earth could communicate with each other. But something happened that resulted in the breakdown of that universal communication. Humans did something, but I can't remember what it was. And so it was that we could no longer communicate with nature or any other living things. We could not even communicate with each other because of our different languages. But perhaps one day we'll learn a language of love, a universal language of love. Sometimes you don't even need words to express that love. But what will it take to break down the walls that divide us, especially the walls that are built around the relationships with Indigenous people, since that's what we're focusing our attention on today? Our people are suffering and have suffered for hundreds of years. Like David in Psalm 13, we're asking, how long must I bear pain in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all day long? How long shall my enemy be exalted over me? Our enemy is racism. Our enemy is systemic racism. Our enemy is, the superiority, the prejudices. We suffer from many injustices. Our land and all our resources have been taken away. Our economy, the buffalo was killed off, and now we're made dependent, and then we're called freeloaders. We were placed on the least desirable pieces of land that they call reserves. We're treated like children. Our children were taken by the Indian residential school system, the 60 scoop, and today the foster care system. So it hasn't ended. We're still losing our children. Our cultures and ceremonies were outlawed, and every aspect of our lives has been governed by the Indian Act. And some people don't even know what the Indian Act is. In 1949, the only freedom we had was what we did with our weeds and what we did with our dogs. On top of all this, we suffer from racism, rejection, prejudice as a people. The general public is totally unaware, for the most part, of our situation, and many could care less. Today, I appeal to Christians and people from all religions and cultures in Canada to listen to our pain and suffering, and to tell the government to start dismantling the systems that oppress us and invite us to die. Consider the 8 Indigenous people who died in police custody. All this, and yet, all this, and yet the 14 white premiers of Canada cannot agree that there is any systemic racism against Indigenous people in Canada. As a people, we're often identified with the social ailments of our people. We have the highest incarceration rates, the highest high school dropout rates, the highest number of suicides and sudden deaths. Our mortality is low. Our women are going missing and murdered. Many of our people turn to alcohol and drugs to numb the pain. This is a result of the racism and attitudes that judge us as inferior. We live in poverty, and in spite of the great wealth of this country, we don't even have clean water. Many of the reserves do not have clean water. Churches and the government have acknowledged the harm done through residential school system. But the police system needs to be dismantled and put back together with consideration of Indigenous people and Black people and other oppressed people who are abused by the police. The system, the Royal Mounted Police, or whatever they were first called, they were set up to control the Indians. And I think that attitude is still there. I think that whole system has to be unpacked, complete with its attitudes and practices of violence. And some of the things they did to our people in the old days. You went to jail, they took you to out in the field. My dad said, you don't want to get caught by the police because they're going to put you in jail. And jail is a little shack out in the prairie, and they put you in there, lock you up, and you freeze to death. And they're still doing that in Saskatoon, taking people out in the, well, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they were doing it a few years ago. So the police is a huge, huge problem that continues to hurt. And our young people are in danger. They're scared. If they get caught, they're going to get beat up. They're worried. We're all worried about that. We've encountered racism in every Canadian system, including the schools. Our kids encounter racism in the schools. And the new Canadians also have to learn about our people, not just the regular, the European Canadians. And in the health system, our people go, and if there's something wrong, they first check you out. They ask you if you're drunk. There are things that happen that people don't know about. I think more people are speaking out, and that's good. And in the justice system, in every area of the justice system, there's injustice for Indigenous people. Because of the support for George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, we're hearing some stories on social media. And newspapers are printing stories of the violence against Indigenous people by the police. But will it make a long-term difference? Only the grassroots people can make a difference. Help us to educate Canadians about our history and our story of Great oppression. There's no reason why Indigenous people should continue to live in poverty, in mental and emotional pain. Unless a large number of people decide to work together, it will not be easy to support Indigenous people, because like Jesus, we are shunned and not popular in this country. Some friends who became passionate about justice for our people got sick, and because they couldn't deal with the oppression that we live with on a daily basis, they felt powerless. But many people working together towards the same goal of justice and peace can make a difference. We have to have many, many voices. We can't have just a few little angels that are doing their best, but we need to really try hard to pray that something will happen that we may be heard and that things will change. As Jesus warned his disciples, there will be pushback against the gospel by those in power, and there'll be pushback from those in power against injustice for Indigenous people. It was dangerous for the disciples, and it must have been so painful to have their families and friends turn on them because of this otherworldly kind of love that they were preaching. It can be the same for those who fight for justice for oppressed people. In some situations, it can get tense, like for those who stood with us Tsawwassen people to defend their land from the pipeline. Justice is not easy work. It takes commitment and courage, but without justice, there can be no peace. Will you march with us, even if it's on a virtual march? Will you write to your MLA to take action against systemic racism against Indigenous people? It is possible for Indigenous people to experience healing from oppression when the systems that bring us harm are taken down or reformed to include respect for our people? Will you help to bring justice to this land we all love? Our people consider all people as brothers and sisters. Our hope is similar to the Revelation idea of the tree of peace, where all the nations gather together. And I close with this passage from Isaiah 59:14-16. So justice is driven back and righteousness stands at the distance. Truth has stumbled in the streets. Honesty cannot enter. Truth is nowhere to be found. And whoever shuns evil becomes a prey. The Lord looked and was displeased that there was no justice. He saw that there was no one. He was appalled that there was no one to intervene. So his own arm achieved salvation for him, and his own righteousness sustained him. May the Lord be pleased with the number of Canadians who will stand with the little ones of this land. May he find not one or two, but many who stand together in righteousness, honesty, truth, and justice. Amen. God bless you, all my relations.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to sing Amazing Grace, but you can sing along, but do you want to mute everybody except me? Is that the way you do it?
Yes.
Kathy? Yes.
I'm happy to do that. And if you'd like me to show the lyrics that you sent, yes, I'm happy to do that right now.
I've only got 2 English verses, but if people feel they want to do another one, that's fine.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Acknowledge my drum. So I'm going to do 2 verses in English and then 2 verses in Cree. Win. You did a good job, Kathy, with that word.
I tried. Thank you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. And just to help you understand how to read Cree, the C is a ch sound. We don't have the keyboard for Cree, so we can't do all the caps and stuff, but the E is an A sound. That's, yeah. And I just want to say something about the Cree. I'm a Presbyterian minister, and we used to, when I was a child, we were not allowed to sing Cree in the church. There was an old woman who used to sing Cree hymns at the graveyard. That's when we would hear Cree out by the graveyard, but not in church. Things have changed because in 2008, I was invited to General Assembly of the church to sing this song in my language. And I thought, my mom must be rejoicing in heaven. Que say what is see when equipe machi head que say manto neki miska me quachwane hoyan neki costenta ne pian equane mamisin que say what say when it Jesus neki ne postama. And maybe just as a Thanksgiving prayer, or maybe there's someone on your heart that you're thinking of right now. And we'll sing this chant as we close. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya. Amen.
That was beautiful and so important. Thank you. We are so honored to have you here today, Mary and Dorothy. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And as they said, all our relations, let us go forth. Let us remember that we are all connected. All sentient beings are connected and must look out for each other. Let's go together now and take care of each other. Amen. Thank you. I will unmute everyone now. And I'll be the last person to leave. So feel free if you'd like. Oh, did I mute everyone? I tried to unmute everyone. Maybe that did not work.
You'd be good.
We have to unmute ourselves too, so if you see we're still muted, maybe, yeah.
I think we're in good shape.
Thank you for having us, I think.
Yes, thank you so much.
So much, Mary and Dorothy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, that was amazing.
Thank you so much.
Very moving. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mary and Dorothy. I'm so moved by what you had to say. So touched.
Me too, pushing back tears.
Yep. Feeling that too.
I have some hope in Canada because I am sort of half living in America and half living in Canada. At least in Canada, I hear a lot of discussion, a lot of talk about First Nations, Indigenous peoples issues in the lower residential schools. And I don't even hear that talk in America. Canada is ahead, I think, of the US in dealing with its issues. That's not to say there's not a long, long way to go there. But I think we can take some hope in that on the Canada side. And on the US side, this current turmoil and social upheaval gives me a lot of hope, not only for the plight of Blacks and other minority groups, but particularly too for Indigenous people here in America. We all need to keep pushing and anything we can do, Mary, please instruct us further, as maybe you have opportunity to do so. I really want to learn from folk like you.
I'll send information to Kathy. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm always happy to include anything you send me in our bi-monthly emails and on our website. Thank you.
So thanks, Mary and Dorothy. This is balm. I hear my mom in you. My mom was very Christian as well, and I hope to be an ordained priest. And I think without color, it is our job as human beings to be prophetic, to be prophets. And love is not a weak thing, it's a fierce thing. It's built with chainmail, and it's also soft and tender, and we have to be able to use our words to lift people up and to open our eyes. And thank you.
Sheila, are you interested in learning the Cree language?
Yes, I've been trying to teach myself with an app.
Do you have Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay, Facebook me and I'll give you the information on how to touch base with us through us.
Yeah, I'll have to learn it for school too. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm interested, Cliff, in what you were saying, because some of the reading that and the talking that I've been doing this week has pointed towards the racism in Canada being more underground and more subtle. And so in a way, I think we have to work harder at digging deep or listening better to Mary and Dorothy, and for those of us that are concerned when we hear that, and when we hear that there's 14 white provincial ministers that are not acknowledging that there's systemic racism and unconscious bias, it's so scary. And I think for those of us who are concerned, I think even listening deeper and finding the words to peacefully resist that subtlety, and patting ourselves on the back, oh yeah, we've got it. No, I don't think so. So is my what I've been thinking about this week, that's all. Yeah.
My experience is kind of like,
oh, go ahead.
My experience is kind of like Cliff's. It's from the States. We grew up in an area that was Sioux City, Sioux Center, Sioux Falls, Sioux County, Sioux River, and the Sioux are no longer there, but no one talked about it. So my understanding between Canada, around Canada and the U.S. is that a top layer has been taken off in Canada, and there is conversation happening. But I agree with you, Carolyn. There is so much subtlety underneath that people are not yet acknowledging. And I think that starts happening when you go inside, when you're willing to go inside and look at your own subtle racism. That's why what Steve and Sadiqa and Kathy are doing in terms of helping people understand where the racism is coming from in their own self is also so really important. That's a piece of the puzzle.
I think that comes from generations past, where the natives were put on the reservations, and they were trying to get rid of them in so many ways with infected blankets. And as a child growing up near the town of St. Paul, every time we went to the town, we were in the residential school, but every time we were brought to the town, we were stared at as if we just got stared at, and that left me with a very, very low self-esteem, you know, and I was ashamed of being Native, you know, and when I went out on my own, I was only 16 when I decided that I wanted to do something with my life. I hated to see what was happening to the people in the reserve, especially with the alcoholism, right? And I didn't want to live that kind of life, so I ran away from home and determined that I was going to do something with my life. And when I spoke to people, and people spoke to me, all I could do was answer yes or no, because I thought they would think I was stupid if I opened my mouth. But within a year, I was taking the nursing training course, and I was really fortunate because I didn't quite have the education, and I was only 17. You needed to be 18 years of age, right? But they took a chance on me, and on a 3-month trial basis, and I was determined that I was going to pass. You know, so I give that credit to my parents and my grandparents, because they were very hardworking folks, you know, and because of the upbringing that I had before residential school, it really makes a difference on how children are raised from a very young age, because you never forget the teachings that you get, you know, and I didn't have issues with any racism while I was working in the nursing field. However, the first time that someone said something to me was a Christian friend of mine. We were a city, and I had gone to give her a haircut, and I had loaned her my guitar, and I thought I was going to get my guitar, but she said that she had gotten so used to it and was kind of reluctant to give it back. So I just gave it to her. And then while I was cutting her hair, she just suddenly said, you know, she said, you Indians are a bunch of freeloaders, you know, and that kind of took me by shock, you know. And I said, you know, I've been working since I've been 16 years old. And I said, I pay taxes just like you do, you know. And I said, you should consider yourself quite fortunate, because, you know, the reason you're paying taxes is for you to have the privilege of living on this land that my great-grandfathers first walked on, you know. So that was my answer to her. But anyway, yeah, I've forgiven her for that, you know, because generally, people who are racist don't know any better, you know. You see a lot of racism on the reserve when I go back home, and the you know, the First Nations are still angry, you know, and a lot of the First Nations who have gone to residential schools are still angry, and a lot of the elders encourage the young people not to follow the white man's religion, which is really sad, you know, because the First Nations people did have spirituality. They were very, very spiritual. You know, their God was the Creator, who is the God of all people. And they knew the Great Spirit, you know, the Holy Spirit, is a great spirit who inspires us all, you know. And to know Jesus, I think, is the greatest blessing of all. You know, I knew about Jesus as a very young child, and I treasure that knowledge. You know, so I pray for our people that you know, there are a lot of really good people out there, a lot of good elders, but it's just kind of sad that some of them have been told, you know, not to follow what they call the white man's religion. You know. And that just comes from the treatment they had in the residential schools, and the way they have been treated, you know, as a nation. So it's really sad, you know. So that's why I lift up that prayer on Psalm 67, you know, that all nations come together to be able to accept each other, no matter what your faith is, because God is merciful. You know, God is merciful, and I believe that everyone that lives a life filled with love will go to a good place. You know, so just wanted to share that.
What impacted me from what Mary shared today, and really what you just shared, is how Aboriginal peoples have accepted a white man's gospel, which is amazing to me. I remember reading a book called White Man's Gospel, and I just thought, and ever since I read that, that book didn't really answer the question why Aboriginal peoples accept a Christian gospel, and and when Mary mentioned it today, now I understand, and because it reminds you of stories that you have, and stories that have been brought down through through ancestry, and that's amazing to me. And because I feel like how much we've done to you, how much wrong we've done to you, I mean, the last thing I would expect would be for you to say, we believe you. I'd expect you to start a civil war, but you've never done that. And so I see the love of Christ in you. And the reason why I love you is because even though I'm not Aboriginal, I love you because I see Christ in you. And I think Aboriginal peoples are the absolute most amazing example of Christ's love. And it's absolutely blows my mind. So thank you for forgiving us.
Okay. Thank you.
On to that. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oops. Oh no. What did I do?
We can hear you.
We can hear you and see
we
you.
can see you too.
Oh, I can't see you. What did I do?
Just hit the Zoom button, Mary.
It's not doing it.
Hit
Anyway.
the one with the little camera on it. If you can find the button.
Oh, at the bottom? Oh, okay.
Does
Oh,
that work?
okay. So it's, oh, that's the other button. That's the conversation button, the chat button. Okay. Okay, maybe if I go, oops. Uh-oh.
How about the share screen button, Mary?
No, not that one. That'll share your computer.
Okay.
And on the bottom left, Mary? The bottom left.
Okay, well, I guess if you can see me, I can't see you, but I
Yeah, we can see you.
say that our people have our own, you know, the medicine wheel, they call it. Some people, the wheel is what a lot of our elders refer to it as, but it's like, it's a very, very spiritual, and when you say very Christ-like, I understand that. There was once a man who prayed in Cree, and he said he wasn't Christian, but I didn't believe him because the love was there. The spirit was there. And even the way he prayed, it was amazing. So anyway, I just want to thank you for that comment, and also thanks to all of you for your supportive comments, and even the honesty to say I don't know anything about it, but I will see what I can do to learn or try to understand. I love those words. I love hearing people say that. Am I still on?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Actually, Sheila and I are in an anti-racism book club, and we were talking, our first book that we're reading this month is White Fragility, which I admit is kind of awkward because not everyone in the group is white. So that's important, but it still touches on a lot of internalized ideas of privilege and fear of talking about racism and letting go of one's privilege. But Sheila and I were saying we could open up the selections to include more books that also deal with Indigenous issues, and so that we can educate ourselves further. So yeah, I'd be willing to do that. And if anyone is interested, because it's sort of, I'm sure there are more, but I know of at least 3 different levels where we have to do the inner work for those of us who are not Black or Indigenous, to do the inner work of realizing, well, these are the things I don't know, but why don't I know them? Like, I'm sure that there's a part of me that knows some of that, but I never look into that further. Why is that? And sort of letting go, realizing these things about ourselves, and trying to let go of that. And then also there's the stage of educating ourselves so that we do know, and then we can educate those around us who are also from more privileged backgrounds so that they will know as well. And then also doing actions that are more activist in nature, like writing to the MPs because their decisions are ridiculous, and marching and actually doing things that are directly supportive. So there are all these different levels that we have to work on. But I think that might be a good thing for us to do, so that, because I don't want it to be that the only time we talk about this is when you two are here, and the only things we know come from you, and otherwise we don't do any work on our own. I think we have a lot of work that we have to be doing as well.
Well, Kathy, I think we do have a number of agendas here in this group, and but I think this is perhaps the top priority. And I don't know if our Indigenous guests, Dorothy and Sheila and Mary, are aware. Maybe you told them, but the way that that Kathy opened the meeting today, acknowledging that we are meeting on Indigenous lands, is the way we open, is the way she opens every meeting. It's not just today. And so this is a high priority for this group. And I think just by virtue of the fact that that's the thing that you, Kathy, deem most important to open our services with, to inform us all that this is a #1 issue for us.
That's right. That really is. And I have to say that is one of the difficulties of having an interfaith group, is there's a lot going on. And my background is in Jewish-Muslim relations, which is certainly its own gigantic thing, but also, especially since many of us are here from Canada, and trying to do things more locally. And like you said, trying to call attention to what is within our sphere, what can we do? And I keep hearing the phrase raise up, so I'm feeling like Spirit keeps telling me raise up, but raising up Indigenous peoples and Indigenous issues. I think this is an important thing for us.
Kathy, have you heard of the Truth and Reconciliation and the 96 calls to action?
Yes.
One of them is education of our history in the schools. It's amazing that has never been done. We did a CD, we produced a CD in 2012. And part of it includes my personal story of growing up. And actually, I'll send you a copy of that if you like.
Yes, please.
The studio, first the studio in Surrey recorded our music, and one day after I was telling my story, I came out and he's standing there with big tears rolling down his eyes. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Well, I didn't know. I didn't know that." I said, "Didn't know what?" He said, "What happened to them?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Your parents." I said, "Well, they both died. My dad was killed in a car accident, and my mom died about a year later." He said, "I didn't know." He said, so he mostly was identifying with my dad because, our men, their vocation as providers of their families was taken away. The economy was taken away. And so you lose your purpose in life. How do you survive? How do you go on? He tried so hard to continue to take care of his family. Did everything he could. He kept trying to trap, but you couldn't go anywhere anymore. And all the places where you could go hunting, they had given to the farmers after the Second World War. And there was no place to go hunting, hardly ever. And if you went into a farmer's land by accident, you could be shot. And it was totally legal to do that. So yeah, it's very, very as I originally was responding to something you said. Now I forget what it was. Anyway, but yeah.
I just wanted to add, like as an American who's only been here 3.5 years, it's true that there's more dialogue, at least in Vancouver, about issues, but I've seen so much racism towards Indigenous people. So I think there's a lot of it here, and there's a lot of ways it gets expressed. I think in more rural areas, it's very, very overt. Some of the protest camps, like the one on the Wet'suwet'en territory, the women that are living in the tiny house there, they're getting regularly harassed by usually white men who come and harass them on a often daily basis. There was a truck actually it was a cross-country vehicle that came into their camp at night, and they stole the truck and rammed the truck into their house. And I mean, it's very overt there. In Vancouver, it's less overt, but I've been party to conversations in which white people will say, well, why can't they do this? Or why do they do that? Or have you been onto the reserves? Have you seen how they blah, 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 blah? So, you know, it's not getting into a truck and ramming it into a house, but it's really ugly still. And it's, when you try to argue against it, it's really hard to get through to people. And I think as a white person, I always do try to push back in whatever I feel like is the most effective way I can. And I think that's one of the things I can do as a settler. When I'm in settler communities and I hear this kind of talk, I feel like it's our role is to push back against it. And then there's just a lot of indifference. Like, so many people don't even know anything about it, and they don't care to know. They don't want to know. It's not a priority. That might even be the majority. Yeah. And yet by not knowing, I mean, the system is being perpetuated every single day. And, you know, colonialism is not gone. It's the system that remains in place. And the distribution of wealth, the distribution of resources, the distribution of jobs, everything is still dependent on these relations that were set up hundreds of years ago. And when you have real estate in Vancouver that's worth, you know, you can't buy a house for what, under, I don't even know what the price is. I know it's over $1 million, you know, like that one tiny little postage stamp of a piece of property that's worth over $1 million, multiply that by the number of houses in Vancouver on land that was stolen from Indigenous people. And then the Indigenous people have been pushed onto this tiny little reserve. And that tells you right there that the distribution of wealth is still, those houses are being sold and resold and resold, and that wealth is going into pockets that are not Indigenous, and colonialism continues, you know, and that wealth gets translated into power and into police and into all kinds of things. So it's still very much a major factor here. And, you know, just because people aren't necessarily overtly using language, although they do, because if you say they, that's a way of, you know, dividing people and being racist, you know. So it's very much alive here. I think we are talking about it more than in the States, but it's certainly, as I would say, as strong here as it is in the States. It's just we are talking about it more.
I mean, are we really talking about all the different parts of it? Because, so like the thing I just shared in the chat was some stats I looked up just like 2 weeks ago when I don't remember, right, a friend of mine, an Indigenous friend of mine who is from, who lives in Seattle, but who has relatives up here on Vancouver Island. She said she'd posted about how Canada in some ways isn't really that much better than the US. And I was surprised when she said that, and I read the article she'd posted, and then I looked up some statistics about police shootings in Canada. and actually, like, I couldn't figure out a good way to express this because if you just take the percentage of, people of a particular group that are killed by police versus their percentage in the population, that changes, right, as the number of people in the population change. Because if you're 50% of the population, you can't be 150% of the people killed by the police. But the numbers were shocking. It was actually like worse than the US, because Black people are 3% of the population and are like 9% of the people killed by police here. With Indigenous people, the ratio is even worse. Like, it's even more than 3. So, and I'd never heard about this here. And so, maybe some aspects of it are talked about, like the residential schools are certainly talked about. We're good, at least in BC, at acknowledging the land. Because, even in addresses as seen by the premier, he acknowledges the land when we go to Science World, before the pandemic. But they acknowledge the land there, the science shows they have. But then I never heard about the statistics around, police shootings and how they differ by race. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some areas in which we are better at talking about it, but there's other areas in which we aren't.
I think it was the TRC that, and the church's apologies about residential schools. I think that's why we're talking about it, or how it got started. Thank you for that. I was also going to mention, someone mentioned healing and reconciliation. As far as our people concerned, unless we get some of the land back and some of the resources back, there's absolutely no reconciliation. And some people say even that word reconciliation is not the right word, because it implies that we once had a good relationship. And it's never been. It's always been an unequal relationship. It's always been a colonial relationship. It's always been a demeaning relationship. It's never been a good relationship. We're savages and all those horrible things that they don't say anymore, but they're still there in the attitudes of people. And the other thing I was going to say, originally, was the other studio had to clean up our CD. And when we went out to the farm out there, Dorothy, and with your sister, and how this young man, who was a young Mennonite, had converted his dad's barn into a studio. And he was listening, of course, because he's recording, listening to our songs and our stories. And he said one day, "How come I didn't know that? How come they never taught that in school?" He said, "This is terrible." And for the first time, he heard the story. He didn't know anything about it. And he said, "My kids are going to know about this. They're not going to grow up ignorant like me." But that's part of the problem. So when you start trying to educate people, you have to go back 300 years. They don't know what the Doctrine of Discovery is. They don't know what Indian Act is. We make plays, and I try to create awareness through the arts. And we went to, well, this one lady was a part of our play at one time. And in a conversation later, someone mentioned the Indian Act. And she said, "Oh, I know what that is." Well, I heard about it. And the only reason I heard about it was through Mary's play. And that's the only way to create awareness to. It's just so time consuming. It just takes forever. But, bringing some kind, like this Black Lives Matter is allowing us to have a say, and they're allowing us a voice. But with the premier saying, no, there's no systemic racism, now it's up to the people to say, no, there's racism here. And it's terrible, and people should be ashamed to call themselves Canadians. And it really is a shame. I've changed a lot since I first took the Native Studies program. It was very, very difficult. I didn't understand what my dad meant when he said our people suffer a lot, until I understood the whole history. I took 4 years of a degree program, and got right into the nitty-gritty of what it all means. The different versions of the Indian Act, the Canadian Constitution, Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the white paper and all that stuff. So it's a very, very huge task that we need help for. We cannot do this by ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is there anything in particular that Hummingbird Ministry needs right now? Like any way that we could support your organization?
Well, just tell the COVID to go away so we can gather again. Anyway, but yeah, we're not able to gather. The families are still scared to let their children. But you know, there is a prayer request. Our children have been encountering a lot of bullying at the school and racism. And then they've also bullying each other in the complex where they live. And we've been trying, you know, it's come up so often during the times when we gather with the kids, the bullying in the complex and children sharing their stories about how they're bullied and how it feels. So this year our plan was to get some people in to talk about bullying and what it is, like from the professional kind of, but also to get some elders to come and talk about it and about relationships. And also in the same time trying to bring out the positive aspects of who we are. We are discovering that among ourselves, and we're sharing that with the children. Like, we have a beautiful culture. We have, our dances are awesome, and our songs, if you hear some of Dorothy's songs, the Cree songs, and because I know Cree, I don't know it as well as she does, but to hear those songs in your heart language is, so we teach the kids some of the Cree in songs. We teach them how to act. Opportunities, we are trying to finish a film on healing and reconciliation. We only had so much funding, and so we had to stop. We can't do any more right now. But eventually I'm hoping that we will continue. And I think this period right now that we're in, about the pandemic and all this awareness that's being raised about the racism, systemic racism. We are working with a group also with my church, the Presbyterian Church, with the staff and others. I asked them, they made a statement immediately for Black Lives Matter, but they never said a word about our people. And I said, more people are getting killed at the same time that the Black people are getting killed. In 1 month, there was 8 people who were killed of our people. And I'll send you that link. That there's no word about it. So I called the moderator, I called the church, and I said, I need you guys to make a statement about what's going on with our people. And so they called a meeting. We had a Zoom meeting and talked about what we were going to do, what are the main issues. And the first statement was so watered down, I just about puked. But you know what? They changed. They said, we're not making just one statement. We're going to keep making statements, because that's what I asked them to do. When you write something down, you know, people send it to people. Maybe somebody reads it, maybe they don't. But they just forget about these documents. They don't even know what the confession of the Presbyterian Church is. They don't know what it is. They've never seen it. You know, people are they just don't care. So we're going to be in their face a little bit. We're going to be sending them these things, and the website is going to continue. We're going to be doing our own education of the Presbyterians. And that's a start. At least we'll have the Presbyterians hopefully gather some of them. We may not get everyone, but we definitely will be putting the word out there to through the statement that the Justice Ministries is doing for our church. So that's another prayer request. That's just for the bullying for the kids and for the work that we're doing at Justice Ministries. And I'm part of the National Indigenous Ministries Council of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. So we're directing them in terms of what, I don't know if you've also heard about the law, Bill number 1, they call it in Alberta, that they no longer, I can send you the link for that too. I found this on Facebook and I said, is this true? And I had no time to look for it. So I sent it to Justice Ministries in our church. And she said, yes, it's true. They're in their third reading. So what they're doing is that basically Indigenous people in Alberta can no longer protest anything about their lands, nothing. They cannot protest pipelines. They cannot protest anything. They cannot say, if they can, of course, they suffer the consequences of being jailed or whatever. And also, it also affects their hunting and fishing rights, which at least we've always had. And that's taken away now. Now, I think somebody's probably trying to push back, but I haven't heard anything yet. But that is absolutely ridiculous. And I want our church to say something about it. I said, you know, if you know, they're pushing this through, it's going to happen in every province. And not only that, it also infringes on everybody's Charter of Rights, infringes on Charter rights. You know, what affects one is going to affect all of us. So even if people say, oh, it's just Indigenous people, it doesn't matter, it does. You let this go, and it's just going to continue. So, and it's all in the name of oil. All in the name of oil, and it just keeps destroying our lands, destroying the water. It's so huge and ugly that it just, I hope that something has to happen. Maybe this COVID is part of it in some strange way, you know, because at least we're being heard, at least the newspapers are covering the stories of the Indigenous people are being killed and things like that. So I just want to thank you all for listening, and I love this circle that you're having.
Can I ask a quick question, Mary, before we leave?
Actually, Samir, Annette first, and then Samir.
Oh, sorry.
You know, I'm thinking, you know, we've all been working on getting smarter, getting more knowledge, and in so many ways trying to enlighten other folks and change hearts. But, you know, safety is just such a basic thing. And I think that one of the places we really need to work is, like you were just mentioning about this law, the same kinds of things are happening in the States, you know, that, you know, we need to be about supporting protection and justice for all. And, you know, it should not matter what your background is or your race or your definition of yourself. You know, safety is safety and human rights are human rights. And so I think one of the places that many religious groups have been way too silent is just talking about having basic legislation and enforcement and accountability. And, you know, the hope is that we'll change hearts and minds and we'll all get smarter over time. We can't wait for that, you know. There are so many people that are just so hardened right now that they're, you know, rational conversation isn't even possible. But regardless of whether they like me or you or anyone else, we have to, as societies, ensure basic safety and rights, you know. So so I'm picking up the top one on the list of 21 things white people can do, you know, and writing letters to leaders, you know, at local and state levels, saying this has to happen, you know. Do we have policies? You know, we need a policy that says every time police go out for a call, they need to be both wearing and turn on their personal cameras. And we have to have review of those things. We have to have accountability, not just for police, but for our elected leaders. And, you know, while we continue to educate and work on hearts, we have to look at how we can provide basic safety.
Absolutely. Thank you, Annette. Samir and then Sheila.
Mary, I was just going to ask, you mentioned the plays that are put on. Are those through Hummingbird Ministries, and where can I find like a calendar of them? Because I'd love to attend some after the.
All you have to do is invite us and we'll come. We'll come and dance for you. We'll come and do a play for you.
Okay. Okay. So it's
ahead of time. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not organized. It's not like there's not already a calendar of shows at a particular location right now.
No, we usually churches will invite us or organizations will invite us. And,
Tell them about the Mary.
Yeah.
Tell them about your annual
the
arts
festival. Oh yeah, we have a Peace Through the Arts Festival. Thanks, Dorothy. Every year we gather people together, and this is all part of the healing and reconciliation work that we do. Every November, first Saturday in November every year, we gather together. I think, Bryn, you were at one of them, right? Yeah. So we've been doing this since 2010. We're gathering people together just because people said, you know, we can't, how can we have reconciliation when we never see those Indians? Anyway, I thought, well, you have no excuse now. Here, you know, come and join us. Come and sing. We share the arts together. We share a meal together. We have a little devotion in the morning. We have the children dance. It's a fun time. And you know, through the arts, you can say things that the difficult things are easier to say through the arts. And you can be quite blatant about it without causing too much of a war, you know. So yeah, we say it gently, but we say it truthfully. It's sad, but it's also, you know, it can be heart-wrenching. Some of the sometimes when we do our shows, some of the elders that went to residential school kind of have a traumatic experience, because we talk about that too in some of our shows. But in the children's dance, usually we just introduce the dances and what they mean. But sometimes, like say for the National or for Canada Day 2 years ago, a group invited us to come, and I said, but we have nothing to celebrate. We have 150 years of oppression. You know, I was honest with my friend, and I said, so you know what, if you're going to invite us, we're going to come and we're going to say something about this. So I narrated the dances. So we told the story through words and the children's dances. So we do things like that as well. We try to be as creative as possible in bringing out the education, trying to inform people. Yeah. The one that we did was called The Confession, and the confession is about the confession of the Presbyterian Church, which brings out, I'm really impressed with the way they wrote it. They did acknowledge the oppression of the religion, and they said they went too far. I'll send it to you as well so you can share it with others. Thanks, Kathy.
Yes, please. And once COVID is over, we'll invite you to have the children come and dance. And
that'd be great.
Really, I'd love for our organizations to integrate more. That would be, I think we would all really appreciate that.
Great, thank you.
And Kathy, make sure that you invite me and others, because I want to come.
Yes, of course. And Sheila, and then Steve. Sheila, I'm sorry, we can't hear you yet. Can't hear you yet, I'm sorry. No. Wait, let me try to unmute you. Wait.
Yes. Hello? Right on. Okay. Just regarding, you know, think of mission as a past thing, and there are still denominations that feel it's their purpose to missionize the indigenous. This right here is the Cree Bible written in Salaam. This is the Book of Common Prayer written in Salaam. And so
I can't hear.
Oh, hello? Can you hear?
I
Very
can't
well.
hear you.
The volume is really low. We
Yeah.
can
It's
hear
low, so I know Sheila was saying that there are some denominations that feel like it's their responsibility to missionize the Cree people. And she was showing the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer.
Yeah, written in syllabics. Can you hear that?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And so, you know, we still have denominations trying to missionize us, and we got it covered as far as, and now my family, my brothers and sisters cannot even read these syllabics, the Bible, and that's the entire Bible. Also, you know, the idea that my brothers and sisters are on reserves, they are renters on their own land. They do not own the land that their homes are under. We take for granted that we own our homes, that we have these spaces out in the communities, but my brothers and sisters don't even own the land underneath their houses on their reserves. So they're not even attached to the land they're on. For a Cree people, for people that are people of the land, that is just heartbreaking. And my son, we homeschool, and my son, since grade 7, his study has been The Inconvenient Indian by Thomas King for social studies. And I had a BC teacher say to me, that was totally inappropriate to teach your child that. That's an adult book. But we, you know, in grade 4, I remember learning about the Holocaust, but we aren't allowed to teach that to our children of our own. So there's still a lot to be done, but there's hope, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sheila. And Steve? Let me try to unmute you, Steve. Okay. Can you hear us, Steve? It's not letting me unmute you.
How about there? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I got 2 computers going. The video's on one and the audio's behind me. No, I just want to say a couple of things. One is what an honor. Thank you so much, Mary, Dorothy, Sheila, to just sit before you and hear your stories. This is what I need. I think a lot of us need this, but that's the posture I want to be in, is just sitting before you and listening. One second. Okay. Thank you. And the other thing I want to say, addressing the issue of how tough this battle is. It's important in the work that I do. I've been working for the last 2 years in the arena of Islamophobia and reconciliation in that area. And one of the things that has been a lot of research has gone into that particular area. But one of the things that they found is that there's 3 groupings of people. There's and it applies in this area. There's the choir, those of us that already get it, and we're on your side. And it's not that, I mean, we all need to learn, but those aren't the people that need to change as much. Then there's on the other end is the extreme opposition, and they're completely covered up in misinformation or preconceived ideas, whatever it might be, and they're pretty much not reachable. But there is a middle grouping that is very reachable, and there's a lot of people that are in that grouping. I found it even in this area of Islamophobia, where it's not just kind of an area of bias, but it's an area where there's just outright hostility, constant. But even in that grouping, in that context, this middle grouping is very reachable, and there's a lot of people out there that understand that things aren't right. They're just as ignorant. They're absolutely just as ignorant as the people that are on the extreme negative side, but they're open. And so if we can find that grouping and do activities similar to this one that enlarge the audience and get to that group of people, those will be the allies. So I just wanted to share that as a kind of an idea that there's hope out there. It's not a just ridiculous, battle that can never be won kind of a thing. That if we can get to that middle grouping, there's a lot of really positive things that can happen.
Thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. And thank you. I so appreciate this discussion. Is everyone okay if I include this in the recording that goes on YouTube? Because I think a lot of what was said is very important, and it would be beneficial to have this for other people to see as well. So if we're okay with that, I'll share that.
Well, if you would have told me that, I would have changed out of my pajamas.
You're with the best of us. I'm wearing yoga pants, so it's all good.
Can I say one more thing before we close?
Yes, Brittany.
One thing that frustrates me in conversations that I have, because before COVID anyway, I was involved in a lot of actions in the street where we were blocking intersections and I hear from people that, oh, that's extreme, and like you shouldn't block the railroads and you're just going to lose support. And the thing that I think it's easy for people with privilege, like white people, settlers, is it's going too fast. There's just too much pressure, slow down, go through the courts, whatever, and the thing is, the status quo benefits the people in privilege. Like, nothing changing is not neutral. And a lot of people that have privilege think, oh, just keeping things the way we are and going slow, that's neutral. But that's not neutral. Anyway. And you have to remember that's not neutral. For nothing to change is not neutral. There's a systemic violence that occurs with no change. And so I just urge people with privilege to remember that things might seem going too fast to them, but to tell people to go through the courts, some of these court battles in BC, Mary, you would maybe know this more than me. I know some of them 30, 50 years, I mean, think if you're in your 20s or 30s now, if you were being told to wait until you're 60 or 70 for a resolution to a particular issue, one particular issue, which isn't even going to change things that much overnight, how would you feel? How would you feel being told, oh, well, just, go through the courts or just don't block the railroads, don't block traffic, don't block people going to work. I mean, you're asking people to continue with a system that is not only immoral, but God, I'm at a loss for words. It's killing people, and you're asking them, oh, don't go too fast.
Yep.
That's just not right. And I just urge, if you're in a circle, particularly because a lot of these things get said when there's not Indigenous people around. If you are in a group where people are saying this, please push back against it, because that's one thing that we can do. We can push back when these racist things are being said in our presence because they think it's okay to say them,
Thank you.
The other side of that perhaps is that we have to at least go at a pace where education can keep pace with social change. I appreciate Mary's terminology, healing and reconciliation. We can have forced reparations, but we won't really have healing and we won't really have reconciliation and until we have, first of all, acknowledgement and awareness raising. And Mandela's term was truth and reconciliation, which means that before even there can be healing, there must first of all be truth. There must first of all be an acknowledgement of how things actually are. And if we compel people to steps of reparation and compel people into a sort of legal reconciliation without first moving painfully and painstakingly through the steps of education and true awareness raising and acknowledgement and truth, and then healing, and then reconciliation, we won't really have a change of hearts, and that's ultimately what we must all be after.
That's not what I heard said, but I don't know. I'll let you respond, Mary.
No, go ahead.
Well, I didn't quite hear that. Personally, I think it is important to change hearts and minds, but I don't think we need to wait until everybody's hearts and minds are changed, because that's not gonna, I don't think that's gonna happen, and change has to happen. So I think there does have to be an element of compelling change. I think that was true in the civil rights movement in the US, which was very unpopular in the time of Martin Luther King. He was not a popular man when people were marching across bridges and having, sitting down in restaurants where they weren't supposed to. There was a lot of resistance to the legal changes, and there still is resistance. So it's not enough just to do it once, but I don't think we can afford to wait until everybody's heart and mind is changed. I think there has to be an element in there of pushing forward the change despite resistance, because it's a moral issue.
Well, Brent, I think maybe you may have misunderstood me. I wasn't taking issue or saying it's an either or a zero sum, one or the other. I was saying it's a both and. And I was saying that, yes, while we are undertaking those steps that might be legal or through the courts or through compulsion, that at the same time, if we don't do the other slower and more demanding steps of raising awareness, we'll never really have the heart reconciliation which we're after in the end.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dorothy.
Dorothy.
Thank you. Mary, Dorothy, both of you, thank you so much. I really just enjoyed learning from you, and as Steve said, sitting at your feet here and taking in. I've been moved to tears several times by your stories, by having my heart opened. I have school-age children, and like Sheila, I'm also homeschooling, and I just wanted to say from my place of hope and education that I'm really encouraged by the amount of requirements under the BC curriculum for the different age groups that are dedicated to Indigenous, local, national, international matters. Several pieces on our curriculum that we're following say, what are the local stories about the landforms? What are the local understanding of the Indigenous people about the ecosystems? And that's our science. What is the local wisdom that we can come from? And I appreciate that as a homeschool family, we take on maybe some more of that than, I don't know what the school systems, and each school is different, and each classroom is different, and each teacher is different, but just in the last 5-6 years that we've been homeschooling, to see more and more content added, and it becoming challenging as my kids getting older. What is the understanding, the commitment by the government to reparations? What are the issues that have social issues that have risen? Our social studies is understanding about the impact of colonization upon the Indigenous peoples of Canada. And I find that very meaningful, because I'm learning so much. As I wasn't born in Canada, I moved here. I'm a settler here in Canada in the last 16, 17 years. But that's my hope, is seeing that my children are getting to learn as children about these stories that are meaningful. And that's part of their language now, is that they can look up at the lions and say, no, those are the sisters. And they can tell me the stories about what these landforms mean, and what the stories are locally here. So I just wanted to share that as a mom, and how I'm being educated and how I'm changing my understanding.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I want to be mindful of time, because I know several people love staying, but we've gone a good bit past time. And I think this was very fruitful and important. So thank you so much again, Mary and Dorothy, for joining us. And we'd always love to have you join us in the future. And yes, so let's please be in touch about this.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, hi, we say in Cree. Hi, hi, thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
Relations.
Hi, hi.
Thank you, friends.
Thank you. It was wonderful.